Got milk? Have you ever enjoyed a nice glass of milk? Have you ever wondered why some people find themselves feeling under the weather after that same glass? If you are lucky enough to enjoy dairy products like ice cream with no troubles, you have evolution to thank. The ability to produce milk is one of the defining characteristics of mammals and is the sole method of providing nutrients to their young. Nearly all babies can digest milk without getting an upset stomach thanks to an enzyme called lactase. The major carbohydrate or sugar component in milk is called lactose, which the lactase enzyme breaks down into glucose and galactose, smaller molecules that can be absorbed or digested by the small intestine. Production of the lactase enzyme turns off in most adult mammals, making them unable to digest lactose. Today, we call this lactose intolerance, or as scientists say, lactase non-persistence. So do your cat a favor and stop giving him milk. Several thousand years ago, some humans developed the ability to keep the lactase enzyme turned on in adulthood, giving them a trait called lactase persistence and allowing them to digest milk. Unfortunately, not everyone can stomach milk equally. According to a study by Pascal Gerbald and colleagues, only 35% of the world can digest lactose, with European populations showing the highest frequency of lactase persistence. But how did this happen, and why are certain people more lactose tolerant than others? Researchers such as Gerbald have noticed that lactase persistence is associated with genetic mutations that originated around the time people began to raise and milk livestock. The idea is that the people with the mutation who were able to consume dairy had some kind of advantage over those who did not. They then passed lactase persistence genes on to future generations. This advantage still remains somewhat of a mystery. One theory suggested by evolutionary geneticist Mark Thomas is that lactose tolerance evolved as a means of survival. In times of famine, animal milk was heavily relied on as it was a very calorie-dense food source. Those unable to digest milk were likely stricken with diarrhea and died shortly thereafter, and so those with the lactase persistence gene would greatly benefit from drinking milk and survive the famine to pass along their genes. Other researchers such as Lauren Cordain suggested theories such that fresh milk was a better, more pure alternative to contaminated water sources, and that milk fat gave people a fertility advantage and possibly even an advantage against malaria. No matter what theory you choose to believe, most researchers can agree on the fact that genes did not work alone, but rather co-evolved with human culture. So much is still not fully understood. Anthropologist Henry Harpending poses the question, which came first, the cattle or the mutation? Well, which is it? He goes on to say that you just can't tell. If the mutation had not occurred, there wouldn't be so much dairying. But if people who could digest lactose didn't have cattle, the mutation would have no advantage. Trippy, right? This may help to explain why certain people are more lactose tolerant than others. For example, as noted by Anne Gibbons, Northern Europeans, who tend to be descended from cattle farmers, are much more lactose tolerant than most Asians who are not as dependent on cattle. This correlation may also be linked to a nomadic lifestyle. A what? A nomadic lifestyle is one in which small groups of people travel large distances in search of resources. These groups of people do not call one single place home. Evolutionary biologist Paul Sherman studied 13 human populations with lactose tolerance and found that they were indeed associated with such nomadic groups. Since these groups were constantly moving with their herds, it is not only thought that they had reduced pathogen transmission, but that they were also able to raise cattle more efficiently and safely. This meant that they were able to increase milk production and ultimately milk consumption in their population. Paul suggests that the populations today who can digest lactose have likely descended from these tribes. Although we have all of these theories, one of the most puzzling aspects of this evolutionary story is that we still don't really know why lactase persistence evolved. While there are certainly benefits to drinking milk and consuming dairy products, many populations do not have lactase persistence and are surviving just fine. Could the ability to tolerate lactose present another benefit that we have not yet discovered? Having said that, if you're one of those people who can't digest lactose, there is no need to be sad. You may opt for alternatives such as lactose-free dairy products. These alternatives are manipulated to contain the lactase enzyme needed to break down lactose and make these products lactose-free. These alternatives still provide the same essential nutrients, such as calcium and high-quality protein, that milk, cheese, and yogurt have to offer. And so, the next time you reach for a glass of milk, you might just think about the evolution that got you there, whether it be cow's milk or not. So you may have milk, but better question is, got lactase?